Hey, what is going on, Los Angeles? It's J. T. And today is Wednesday, October 29th, 2025. And on this installment of JT the LA Storyteller podcast, yours truly wants to talk about none other than the special election taking place in California just this upcoming Tuesday, November 4th. The election is on none other than what is known as Prop 50, which, as you can see on the screen before you, quote, authorizes temporary changes to congressional district maps in response to Texas's partisan redistricting legislative constitutional amendment, unquote. And so we want to talk about this because there's a lot of info fluttering through the airwaves at this minute now as to just what this proposition is and what its consequences may be. And I thought I'd just chime in as someone who, hey, has kind of seen this before, though not necessarily like in my lifetime, but just as somebody who has studied elections, as someone who loves or geeks out on looking at the data and seeing which way voters are likely to go because of the kind of info that's out there, because of the info that percolates, because of what people take home, and because of what they believe about what they are being given a choice over. So this is the text. Go ahead and keep that in mind for yourself for a moment, because what we're going to do is take a look at the districts that are kind of in line for redistricting, more or less. And we're going to take a brief glance at them just because I want you to know that the info exists and that you can go and find it for yourself if you're really passionate about that. And also because, hey, like if these districts are those which are set to change, should this measure pass in just a couple of days out, should the California electorate pass it after all, then I figure it's worth a while. I figure it's worth a shot taking a look at them one last time, because their time's up almost. Now, I'm not going to like go through like all the cities impacted necessarily. I'm just gonna read through the text for a second. Now, I'm not gonna go through like everything. Now, I'm not gonna go through these districts that I really hadn't heard about prior to this vote in too much detail, but I do want to like read a little bit about what they are. The slideshow that I put together for that reason is compiled from a report on none other than Cal Matters. Shout out to Cal Matters, always doing the best work really when it comes to any elections in the state of California. And so let's go through these slides for a second just to see which districts are up for a shift should the electorate pass this measure in just a couple of days. And then I have another special segment where we're basically looking at just what the candidates for California's governorship have to say about redistricting and what we might make of just what they've got to say, because hey, they just might be running the shots soon themselves. That's how it all goes. That's how these elections go. So with that in mind, let's just go ahead and take a look at the first congressional district that stands to change. As you can see there, the current district is marked by this light purple coloring, whereas the proposed district would in fact shift its shape and reconfigure just which voters get to pick their representatives for these areas. Yeah, specifically it says that the proposed changes to the first congressional district in the state of California would cut the current area for the representative there from Santa Rosa through Chico to the Nevada border, with the other ends of this new proposed area going up the coast from Marin County across the Oregon border. Interesting. Yeah, I see that. I see that now. And this is what would stand to go from a Republican seat currently to likely a Democrat seat should the changes pass. And so we can probably rewind for like a slight second to think about just what this came down to, right? Like why this measure even got on the table to begin with. And it's because, as noted in that first image we saw, the fact of the matter is that Donald Trump and the Texas state legislature have decided that they're going to disenfranchise Democratic voters all through the state of Texas because it's better for Donald Trump and the Republicans to retain a majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. And one way to really kind of amplify that, one way to really bolster the likelihood of that being the case, is to reelect themselves. Decide that, hey, like, here are the lines as they are, but if we change the lines, then guess what? We're playing a ball game on our court, and why not? That's what they've gone ahead and figured. And in response, Gavin Newsom and the Democratic Party in California said, hey, if you're going to mess with the U.S. House of Representatives this way on your terms, then so are we. We're going to go for broke here then, in a way. And what it really comes down to is, in fact, like disenfranchising certain voters, switching them out for others, those who are friendlier to you, and you can determine for yourself whether this is democratic or not, or you can basically see for yourself just what it is that this kind of sets us in the direction of, should it continue to play out as the norm for our politics in the US through this decade and beyond. Okay, and beyond is a funny term. Okay, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Now, we've taken a look at the first congressional district. We have a sense of what will change, exactly how the area will differ between now and post the election. And let's go ahead and take a look at the second one then, because there are quite a handful of these. The second district set to change is the third congressional district of the state of California. And you can see that it's like a major change, actually. You can see that, like, instead of this winding region, you've got like a circle, this incredibly much smaller district than what we currently have, than what voters there currently have. And so let's take a look at just which areas these are. So let's read that out for a moment. This sprawling district along the eastern border of California was created in 2022, and the Republican there, a Rockland Republican, faces an uphill battle to hold on to the new elephant-shaped seat, which lops off the conservative-leaning Eastern Sierra and pulls in Democratic voters from Sacramento. Interesting. Kiley, a frequent critic of Newsom, has been particularly outspoken against the redistricting plan, even introducing a bill in Congress that would block states from redrawing their maps mid-cycle. I mean, and hey, like, if the heart of the argument here is that since Donald Trump and the Republicans in Texas can basically redraw their own lines, and Gavin Newsom and the Democrats in California can have at that too, then what is to stop someone such as Kiley, such as Representative Kiley, a Rockland Republican, from saying, hey, you know what, like, I'm introducing my own bill into the mix too, you know? Like, what argument could we possibly wage against that, since the whole point here is to defend one's own turf, at least ostensibly, right? So we'll have to check up at some point as to whether his bill makes any leeway out there. But honestly, I don't see it happening, just because Democrats tend to outnumber Republicans in the California Congress by 2-1 or so. And yeah, they cannot possibly be happy campers through any of this, and neither can the voters being impacted in these areas, right? At least at a glance, that's certainly what the data would suggest, going back to that data. Let's take a look at the next district up for a change, the 9th Congressional District, which Cal Matters has written about as being represented by Representative Josh Harder, a Stockton Democrat. It says the elections have been getting closer. He won his last one by just some 4 percentage points, but the reconfigured map would likely add more Democratic voters from the East Bay. And so, yeah, it's just, I mean, this is what you have to know is actually set to change, right? Because when the issue is framed as being just a matter of Democrats versus Republicans or Donald Trump versus everyone else, we lose sight, or we stand to lose sight. We're more likely to lose sight of just who's actually impacted in the middle, the kind of collateral damage, the people who stand to, the people who stand to actually be impacted by one decision or the other on this case. So we move on to the 13th Congressional District, where it says here, where Cal Matters wrote that the closest House race in the entire country during the last election took place. The district is essentially the district for the Central Valley, where Representative Gray, a Turlock Democrat, defeated the Republican incumbent by only 187 votes. Similarly to the 9th district, then, it looks like adding more Democratic voters should make it easier for Democrats to hold on to this seat in the Central Valley. And that's what it is for the 13th, then. We now take a look at the 22nd Congressional District. It says it's another Central Valley district, and it already has a Democratic voter registration advantage, but still tends to lean conservative. Most voters there voted for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris in 2024. And yet, it looks like under the new map, they'd be adding, that is, the 22nd Congressional District would be adding more voters from the Democratic side to, get the Republican out of there. It looks like basically this circle is going to turn into more of a rectangle, because that's what the legislature has configured would be better for the Democrat or the Democratic Party there. And okay, if you say so. Now we take a look at the 27th Congressional District, and this is, I believe, kind of closer to the Santa Clarita area as far as I understand. It says here that, we're looking at north Los Angeles, where the North LA suburbs are at. And we take a little bit out of the high desert, like these areas going even farther north of Santa Clarita, and we'd swap them out for voters from the San Fernando Valley, which would then make the 27th Congressional District a little more Democratic than Republican. That is in terms of voters coming out to elect the former for the party or for the Congress. And so it's another map set to change. And just taking a look at these, I know that I believe it was Paul Mitchell, who's like this huge data guy, was a part of reconfiguring these districts. And I'm really curious to hear what he has to say to those voters who lean Republican and who are not going to be pleased with so many different changes to the district maps midway through the decade, which does in fact run contrary to the California Constitution, which mandates that districts be remapped every 10 years, every decade, not halfway through. So if at some point we're able to land them on the podcast, by all means, I think it'd be an excellent conversation at a minimum. Now we take a look at the 41st Congressional District, which is in Riverside County. It says here that it was once safely Republican, but that it got swingier after the last round of redistricting, meaning as recently as 2022. And then it says that Republican or Representative Ken Calvert, a Corona Republican, has been in Congress for more than 3 decades. So I guess he's repped the seat for over 30 years, and that he's even squeaked through some serious challenges. It says that the new map would break Calvert's district, though, and redistribute the voters while adding back a historic Democratic seat in southeast Los Angeles County. So, wow, yeah, it would really change that district, and he'd basically have to meet a whole new electorate in order to ensure his reelection again. So, fascinating work there, I guess. Maybe the Democratic Party thought, hey, like after 30 years, we think you've had enough. We're going to take you out in style, because this is definitely that. It completely reshapes the map as voters know it. And so, hey, I mean, we're this close. We're this close to making it the case. So I think we'll definitely be hearing at some point from these voters who stand to be disenfranchised by Prop 50 in this scenario. Now we take a look at the 45th congressional district for a moment, and it says here that it took weeks to determine the outcome of the last election in this heavily Asian American district along the border of LA and Orange counties. So it also looks like, yeah, the new map would slightly take away from the Orange County side, or that farther like northeast side, and it would add in voters from, as it states on the Cal Matters screenshot, voters from around Norwalk, making it a little more Democratic than Republican in all likelihood come election season. Okay. Now we take a look at the 47th congressional district, where it says that Democrats have managed to narrowly hang on to this coastal Orange County seat for several elections in a row. The new map tilts the district further in the Democratic Party's favor by including a part of Long Beach, and of course by also taking out another part of that sort of southern east portion that you see there, right? Last but not least, we have the 48th congressional district. It says this change is perhaps the biggest reach for Democrats in the new map. By moving voters from the Coachella Valley into the eastern San Diego County district, it goes from safely Republican to a slight Democratic registration advantage. That could allow them to take out the veteran Rep. Darrell Issa, an Escondido Republican. Fascinating. Just fascinating. And so that is what this measure actually looks to shift if and when voters pass it. And I think even just that slight kind of tour through the districts is helpful in order for us to visualize just what is taking place here, right? Like, there are certainly arguments to be made that, hey, like if it's a democratic society and the state of California happens to be more Democratic leaning than Republican leaning, so to speak, then let's have a vote and see whose policy wins out. And right now, on this kind of national scale, the Republicans have frightened not just Californians, but Chicagoans and New Yorkers and Portlandians. I don't know how people in Portland refer to themselves and such, but this is kind of why such a dramatic change to the districts is basically at play. It's at play because folks are scared and they have to react. They want to react. And this is essentially what the Democratic Party and Gavin Newsom have proposed as being the most appropriate reaction. So it's fascinating, but I'm not the only one who has something to say on the issue. In fact, we have this pretty special report from Julie Watts of CBS, in which she interviews the front runners and even non-front runners for California's governorship in 2026 on none other than redistricting. And so it's pretty interesting And I do advise any Californian to check it out because these are the folks kind of in the mix for the governorship by November 2026, and even before that in the primaries come maybe June. And what we'll do is, even though we don't have time to go through the entire interview, we'll check out a little bit of what these folks have to say on none other than Prop 50. Because what they say here should tell you quite a bit about what they've got to say about the state of play for politics and for California's role, for California's massive role in the US political landscape between now and 2028 into 2030 and more. I think it's definitely illuminating, and it's definitely very interesting. It's definitely a well-conducted interview with these folks, and Julie Watts, hats off to her as well as the CBS team for organizing it as they did. And so even though we won't go through the entire interview, we'll definitely check out the first 15-ish or so minutes. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and kick this one off.
Redistricting.
Yes.
What is your opinion? What do you think of the governor's plan?
I think this effort right now underway to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't put his thumb on the scale on the votes in Congress, which would jeopardize trillions, certainly billions of dollars of taxpayer money that we send to the U.S. Treasury, because no one sends more money, taxpayer money, to Washington, D.C. than do Californians. Yet we're not getting it back. The $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, what we call Medi-Cal here, the cuts to research grants that we were getting in our universities, all those are dollars that Donald Trump cut, but they're also dollars that we sent to the federal treasury, and now we're not getting our fair share.
How does redistricting get that money back for us?
It makes sure that Donald Trump can't put his thumb on the scale, rig the voting process in Congress by making sure that the people who are voting in Congress are people who won their seats the right way.
So just right off the bat, Julie Watts had a very specific follow-up question to Mr. Becerra's reply, which was about how Prop 50 specifically gets back the billions or trillions of dollars cut off by Donald Trump and the Republicans, even though the state of California is owed them. She said, or she asked very plainly how Prop 50 gets the money back. And Becerra went on to answer that, like, it makes sure that the people voting at the U.S. House of Representatives were elected there fairly. That's just not going to fly. That just doesn't work, because we just went through 20 minutes of taking a look at how the Democratic Party is gerrymandering and shifting the map, basically to elect its own rather than Republicans, or rather than folks who wouldn't vote in line with the Democratic Party. And so it's a little bit of a real deflection there. It's an answer without it being an actual response to what Julie Watts was asking in good faith. Like, how does Prop 50 specifically get California's trillions or billions back? And Becerra, in replying as he did and responding as he did, basically said, hey, it doesn't. It doesn't, but we're going to go with this talking point because that's the talking point we've all agreed to. And I just don't think that that's very genuine. I can't put it any other way. Let's go ahead and take a look at this next response.
What's your opinion of the governor's plan?
I think it's horrible. I think it's let me tell you how broken something is by telling you I'm going to break it more. Murder is not acceptable, so I'm going to go murder you. Death penalty. He says the death penalty is not acceptable, so he just did away with it. it doesn't fly. It flies in the face of his decision to do this. He's saying this is wrong, so I'm going to do it too. He's saying the death penalty is wrong, so he's not going to do it. He isn't going to do it just because we told him we want him to. That's what the voters wanted. He's going to do what he wants to do. So this is a perfect example. I'm going to tell you all that someone else is breaking the law, so that means I can break the law. I'm going to tell you all that someone's doing something unethical, so I'm going to do something unethical.
This has become
Well, sitting here and telling you that I just so happen to agree with this former sheriff, Mr. Chad Bianco, is something I did not expect to do. But hey, he's being frank about the matter, right? I mean, his whole thing is about how two wrongs don't make a right. It's that simple. That's kind of what we go to school to learn. That's kind of what we're told about, the moral high ground. That's kind of the logic we've come to apply more or less when it's come to fighting back against policies that we find offensive, if not absolutely antithetical to a democratic society, I'm going to say. And so it's because he has no interest in covering up for Newsom the way a Javier Becerra would, right? I mean, unless you've been living under a rock, you likely know that Gavin Newsom is definitely running for the presidency in 2028, and that, hey, this moment right now is all about preparing for that, preparing ammo, preparing talking points, preparing a case he can lay out to the American voters, so to speak, about how he fights back and about how he leads initiatives to take it to Donald Trump and the Republicans toe-to-toe. And someone such as Mr. Bianco has no interest in that fight, no interest in that presidential run. He speaks plainly in terms of the fact that, hey, like, you're looking to have it both ways, but that's not okay. And someone's got to call that out. Someone's got to call it just for what it is. Now let's see what this next candidate has to say. I'm not too familiar with him, haven't seen him before, but let's go ahead and hear him out for a minute.
a little bit of a divisive issue in my own house. My wife she doesn't like it. She doesn't support it. She thinks that districts should be drawn by independent redistricting commissions and that it is wrong for the state to be putting its finger on the scale.
Now, just to be sure, yes, districts should be drawn independently. But it's also the case that when districts are drawn or redrawn for political purposes every 10 years, most people who vote, especially in a state as large as California, we are the largest state in the union. We are 40 million people here. Most of us don't get to participate in that process whatsoever. And most of the people who we know, most of the people next to us, most of our neighbors, most of the people we got to work with, they don't get to choose that either. So just to be certain, when it comes to this idea of independent redistricting, yeah, obviously we should independently redistrict and not gerrymander these political maps, but we got to call it for what it is. It's not like we have been doing that over the last 50, even 100 years. Now we want to start that, but hey, it's kind of late in the game. It's late in the game. Speaking of late in the game, let's see what Mr. Calderon's wife has to say on the matter.
And for me, I've been in government, and
Or what he has to say on the matter as opposed to his wife. He's been in government.
seen the impacts of especially what this administration and Republican-controlled Congress could do to a state like California if Donald Trump just decides to dry up some dollars coming to the state. And we're a donor state. We get far more than we get back. You know, if I'm forced to make a choice and have my ballot sitting in front of me, I'm voting yes. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to have hope of any type of leverage, throughout the next couple of years during Donald Trump's presidency, it would be really helpful if Democrats controlled Congress so that we could fight back and secure the money that is coming to California. But again, this really illustrates a lot of the frustration that I have with not just my party, but politics in general, is that this is all in response to something that Donald Trump said. And we had the upper hand on this issue. Okay, Donald Trump, you go to Texas and you tell them to go ahead and redraw the map and create 5 new seats over there and take them away from Democrats. That is a great opportunity to rally the troops and introduce legislation in Congress, even if you're a minority party, saying, you know what, I think that this is wrong. We shouldn't gerrymander districts. We should be more like California and have an independent redistricting commission do that and author the legislation and put them on the spot and make them say that we should continue to gerrymander across this country. I think that would have been more strategic. I think that would have been more significant. But here we are, we're left with this decision. And in my own family, day comes up, we vote, my wife's going to vote no, and I'm going to vote yes.
Now, what he's talking about there for a second is actual leadership in the Democratic Party and an actually concerted effort by Democrats from California through New York and everywhere in between, in which they're standing up to Donald Trump and the Republicans toe to toe, saying, hey, you know what? We are different. We are the party of actual democratic or fair elections, and we demand that you tell the American people how you're willing to jeopardize the Constitution and throw it all into the ground because you're that maniacal, you're that obsessed with power. As he noted, this is not the case because the Democratic Party is not challenging the Texas redistricting plan as a whole. They have essentially said, hey, if you want to go ahead and do that in Texas, so be it. And Mr. Newsom and Democratic Party over in California, if you want to respond accordingly, have at it. And so it's strange because it places the voters in between, right? Like we went ahead and looked at which congressional maps stand to change. And now the electorate in California is just on the cusp of going ahead and making it happen. And so it's interesting because voters get caught up in the mix then, right? These elected officials have actual power, at least on paper, and they can hold votes, they can introduce bills, they can really rally and make some noise and even shut down the government. We are in a government shutdown currently, especially as it relates to healthcare and healthcare benefits drying up in early 2026 due to the Republicans' big beautiful bill and their intention to axe social or public welfare and social or public goods. We really shouldn't call it welfare because taxpayers already paid into these programs, to be sure, but that's the kind of power that they have as elected officials, right? And yet Gavin Newsom and the Democratic Party have kind of taken up their own space in this because of the power of the Golden State, because living here and being an elected official here, it really puts you on a national stage. You really are in the national conversation, as few other states are, with the exception of Texas or a state such as Texas or Florida, these other massive states with a whole lot of influence over the rest of the union, including along party lines. So everyone here is in a bit of a predicament, as Ian Calderon said, or as Mr. Calderon said, largely because of something that one person said, largely because of something that one official got snowballing out there. And a question for us in such a scenario then is just where the democracy has been, just where the Constitution has been all this time, if all it took over the course of less than a year into this administration's tenure was a couple of votes to change some maps in Texas to upend the entire thing. If that's all it took, and if that's how fast it went, then is a democracy really what we've been living through in the United States, even through the 21st century? Not up to me to say today. Let's go ahead and hear more from these candidates.
Redistricting. What is your opinion on the governor's plan?
Well, we have to preserve democracy.
Speaking
It's
of-
not transparent. It certainly isn't representative of government.
No, what is it? His plan
No,
or
no,
the
no.
current?
The current situation we're in.
Okay.
And if I was governor today, I would have to respond and protect the great state of California from this boomerang effect
From Texas.
from Texas. And I like the fact that the governor invited all the Democrats into California, but it gives me the heebie-jeebies because I saw the movie Civil War. Did you? I saw it. It was written by Brit.
Watched
But in the most dystopian way, California and Texas get together in the Western forces to fight the DC operatives, the swamp. And it doesn't end well for somebody. I don't want to give you the spoiler.
How do you feel about the governor's?
Now, he did mention something. Let's see, just to be sure. Mr. Klubeck did mention something that I think was important. He mentioned the term transparent. And it's as he said, hey, like Prop 50 in its current form is not transparent. And so if it's not transparent, the real reason I see this kind of coming back on Gavin Newsom and the Democratic Party is because, you know what, like eventually people are going to find out when you are not fully transparent with them, and they're going to get together and talk about that. And you might not like what they have to say, and certainly not what they have to organize, as they kind of hold you accountable for what you said, for what you promised and then gave or failed to actually give. And so, yeah, he's clearly a Democrat. He's clearly voting yes, but he also pointed out that, hey, this is a little bit of a bait and switch or a major bait and switch. And if we don't own it, we might be in trouble for this later. And I think he's onto something there. Now let's see what this next candidate has to offer.
Redistricting plan.
Well, it's totally corrupt, and it's unconstitutional, and it's illegal, beyond even the constitutional changes that he's trying to make through the ballot initiative that he's trying to get on the ballot. In fact, I'll be filing a lawsuit challenging its constitutionality in federal court, which hasn't been done yet by the various opponents of this. But let's just take a step back, which is we all agree, I think, that politicians shouldn't draw their own maps. I mean, that's obviously wrong and corrupt. Common sense tells you that.
But isn't that what Texas is doing?
So Texas is following its constitution, however. So Texas didn't change its constitution to take the power to draw the maps out of the hands of the politicians, put it in the hands of the people, which we did here. No one wanted this. There's no one in California saying to the politicians, please, give us new maps. Give
Well,
us.
there might be now because they're out there, you know.
I know, but it's lower gas prices. Give us lower housing costs. Give us more jobs. That's what people want. So I would much rather this whole thing wasn't happening. And the cost of it, $250 million of taxpayer money for something that nobody really wants apart from the politicians.
Redistrict.
Wow. Kudos to Mr. Hilton, and honestly, kudos to the state of California, where it is within your right to run for the governorship of the state of California, even if you're not born here. Were the same true for that executive office over on Pennsylvania Avenue? We just might be living in a whole different era. But he did point out that, hey, like this is not what the California Constitution allows for. We're circumventing there, and we're spending all this money on the initiative, and it's essentially contradictory to what a democracy is supposed to be. So why don't we do something about that? Why don't we call it what it is? And I do think it's important for for both sides to really look at this comprehensively and point out a few things, including that no one wanted to get to this level, not as far as I can tell, but that now that we are here, we've placed this major shakeup on everyone's hands and spent some $250 million in the process. When, as Mr. Hilton pointed out, people want better gas prices, more than that, better housing opportunities, better housing options somewhere, somehow in the state of California, right? And yet this is what we have to vote on come November for the special election. And I think we can do more, but we have to remind people of that first and foremost. We got to let them know that, yes, we actually do have quite a bit of power and can make quite a bit of impact out there if we choose to concentrate on the right things as an electorate. And in this case, it's a real quagmire, because really no one wins, even if Prop 50 wins at the end of the day. Now let's hear what Katie Porter has to say, because you may have heard about what Katie Porter had to say in this interview, but maybe not. If this is just a glimpse at that, then so be it.
What do you think of the governor's plan?
I support the governor's plan.
What is your
That was fast. and yeah, we're not going to go through the viral moment with Katie Porter and Julie Watts. You can go ahead and find that for yourself. I just want to hear and reflect with you on what these candidates have to say right off the bat on Prop 50. And sure enough, up next is Tony Thurmond, who's the Secretary of Education for California, as far as I understand. Let's hear what he thinks.
your opinion of the governor's plan?
I support it. I've endorsed it publicly. I think that we're looking at real gerrymandering coming out of states like Texas, and California has an opportunity to push back and to say that we not only will give voters something better and the chance to gain 5 new Democratic seats, we're doing it in a way that is transparent. We're doing it in a way that lets the voters decide.
Let the people decide, and I'm for it.
All right, now just before we go ahead and hear out Mr. Villaraigosa, former LA Mayor Villaraigosa, let's just make a note of one thing Tony Thurmond said, which was that the bill is transparent. I simply disagree. I don't see what is transparent about it whatsoever, but maybe we get back to that if we have time. Let's hear what the former LA mayor has to say, though.
You know, with the targeting of California fire victims, the raids in California, the ICE raids, going after UCLA and taxpayer dollars and holding us up for more than $1 billion, I think people have a right to challenge what's going on. You know, this rigged election that they're trying to do nationally, and he gave people a voice. Now, initially, they were talking about doing this in the legislature. And initially, they didn't make it clear that it was going to be temporary. I was against that because I voted for the Redistricting Commission. I supported it back when.
Redistricting.
Yep.
All right. Well, what's tough here is that Mr. Villaraigosa is certainly correct that people have the right to stand up and fight back against this administration. If you know anything about JT the LA Storyteller podcast, you know how we roll with that. But where he really sort of gets in his own way is when he notes that, hey, like, this is the California electorate acting as a voice together. And I think that that's tough because it's not the people of California making this collective decision through their own volition, through their own innovation, through their own scrutiny of the issues, and then a calculation as to what to do about them. It's the Democratic Party of the state of California. And last time I checked, the Democratic Party in the state of California, since Newsom took up office, but also before that, still has the largest amount of homeless people anywhere in the United States, it still makes the cost of living, it still maintains a cost of living that is out of reach for increasingly more people year by year. And it still hasn't even brought state payer healthcare or universal healthcare for the state of California to so much as a vote, so that voters here, so that the electorate here could actually make a decision about it. The Democratic Party and the state of California have much to account for. And so when former Mayor Villaraigosa is saying, hey, like, the people have decided that this is how we're going to respond to Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon's naked open fascism, hey, let's just like pause for a second there, because it's not that. It's a handful of elected officials here who decided, hey, we can place this before the electorate while emotions are high, and it should be a score. Once again, I think even if the measure is to go through, we're looking at what they call a Pyrrhic victory in this instance, because people will eventually put two and two together, and I don't think it necessarily ends well for the Democratic Party here and their leadership in the state of California. Let's hear what our next candidate has to say.
What is your opinion of the governor's plan?
I'm against anything that disenfranchises Californians. Fred Hampton, who was a great Black Panther intellectual, was killed by police in Chicago. He said, "We don't believe that you fight fire with fire best. We believe that you fight fire with water best." We're not going to fight racism with racism. We're going to fight racism with solidarity. We're not going to fight disenfranchisement with disenfranchisement. We're going to fight it with representative democracy. The Democrats, they don't want the people's voice to be heard. They want to consolidate power. And under the guise of fighting back against the Republicans and fighting back against Trump, you are handing them more power. Well, what have they done to earn it? In the state of California, are y'all feeling that this has been a state that has been well run and for your best interests, that it's working for working people? So you're going to essentially hand them the keys to make sure that they own every district in the state? You imagine thinking that you can fight fascism with fascism.
Now, I will note that Mr. Butch Ware is a professor at none other than UC Riverside, so he really brings a scholarly lens into the discussion. And how could we miss it, right? I mean, what he points out is basically that this is a power dynamic and a power structure. And I think it's important to think about it as a matter of power, because it is in fact about who gets to call the shots in the state of California, right? I mean, the electorate here, including in places like LA County, has made itself clear, going out, taking to the streets, and organizing around families, around the defense of families in the wake of ICE Stopo. And that's voting with your feet, so to speak, right? Voters have also rebelled and said, hey, like, if Target supports Donald Trump, then we don't support Target. If the Dodgers or the Dodgers organization supports ICE detention, then we don't support the Dodgers or the Dodgers organization. Voters do have various ways of exercising, once again, their power and influence. But what Professor Ware is really pointing out is that the Democratic Party has said this is how it's done, and this is the path forward. And it's scary, because if we redistrict between 2026 through 2030, ostensibly to fight Donald Trump's fascist takeover through the U.S. House of Reps, what's to say that we don't do that again from 2030 through 2034 or 2035? I mean, at what point do we stop? At what point do we pause? Because, in fact, as he put it, you don't fight fire with fire, you fight fire by extinguishing it with water. And so it's fascinating to really get that perspective into the mix here, because I think we need that. It's not always about what we want to hear, but it's also about what we need to hear. Now, I do think this might be the last speaker, and if so, we'll wrap it at that. But that should be just enough nonetheless, because we're going to be hearing from these folks from between now through 2026 for a while, and you can bet I'll be there for it too.
The governor's plan is essential. It is essential from the perspective that no president, no one should be manipulating elections in this way, as the president has asked the state of Texas to do. We have a process for this. It's after every decennial census. We have a redistricting of our congressional seats, our legislative seats. And just the idea that there's manipulation that is being directed from the top that's going to affect California's representation, proportionate representation, we have to fight back.
Redistricting.
I mean, shout out to Betty Yee for pointing out the redistricting process every 10 years, right? Like, again, be transparent. It's clear that she is likely to vote yes on the measure because she identifies as a Democratic Party representative or so. But as she sees it, it is a matter of, again, California using that political weight in a constructive manner. And there are arguments to be made on that end just as well. So we have at least this final speaker, and we'll go ahead and hear what he has to say, make a couple of comments, and then leave you to it to let the city know, of course.
What's your opinion of the governor's plan?
The Newsom's plan. Trash.
Can you elaborate?
Okay, so what? We're going to keep increasing taxes, and we're going to go on this big tirade on this war against Donald Trump, spending state money, fighting the federal government. What are we doing? $250 million to spend on Prop 50? To read, by the way, it violates our Constitution. It's the way that it's set up is that we, the people, are supposed to figure out how the districts are supposed to be drawn. So he's violating the Constitution. He's spending a ton of money doing it. It's trash. It's a waste.
So clearly you were.
So Mr. Zaki is definitely not wrong. You can tell that he is essentially wondering if this is all we got. If after all the money, all the research, if what we've concluded is really that we're just going to go ahead and do the same to fight the evil we portend to want to fight against. And it's a very fair question. It's a very fair question, because if this is what leadership has to offer, then we're in for a storm of more of the same. And I will say, in terms of how these folks have responded so far, and in terms of what their responses might indicate about just what their goals are, what their interests are between now and November 2026 for the California governor's race, I will say, hey, there's time to make amendments. There's time to expand on some of these points. And there's even time where there should be time to retract some of these points as well, because you know what? It's early. And right now, emotions are running high. And right now, this is why Prop 50 is likely to pass. It's just that I think, should it pass, as Julie Watts points out here, the question for California's next governor is what to say to those voters whose districts were taken. What do you say to them? And how do you get across the message to them? And how do you get them to believe that you're still working in their interest, even though you would go as far as to disenfranchise them in such a way through this sweeping initiative? It's a very fair question, and I hope that each of these reps consult with their teams to have a serious discussion about that, because as soon as the dust settles and we enter 2026, the race is truly on. And I think that voters are going to have some pretty powerful questions to ask these folks about this vote and what it says about their commitment to the status quo, including not just the status quo under Donald Trump, but what the status quo in the state of California has looked like throughout my lifetime as a millennial, going on to my mid-30s at this point, and even prior to that, as this once promising state that is now full of housing insecurity, homelessness, a fentanyl crisis, a wage crisis, and the most pronounced wealth gap between rich and poor in all of the union. So this is it for now. A little bit of a lengthier installment than what's been the case most recently, but it's because, hey, there's quite a bit to reflect on as we move into November for this year to close things out. With that said, go ahead and let your neighbors know, let the city know, and let the state know that it's J.T.